"Darling, open the door for my lover," my cheating wife gently said. Her words hung in the air like a dagger, slicing through the last threads of my composure. I stared at her, my chest boiling with a mix of rage and disbelief. The woman I had loved unconditionally, the one I had trusted above all, was standing before me with a calm smile, as if she had asked for something as mundane as passing the salt. My fists clenched at my sides as the weight of her betrayal settled into my bones. But before we dive deeper into this gripping story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the drama. William Billy Harrison was a 32-year-old mechanical engineer with a strong moral compass and a passion for problem solving. Standing 5'11" tall, with blonde hair and blue eyes, his active lifestyle was shaped by years of playing soccer, hockey, and jogging. Billy valued honesty and loyalty, which he believed were the foundation of his marriage to Molly. His hobbies, such as restoring a vintage RV, reflected his practical and hands-on personality. Molly Harrison, also 32, was a charismatic and stunningly beautiful, certified public accountant, CPA. Standing 5'7" tall, with flawless skin, sparkling blue eyes, and a toned physique achieved through dedicated gym sessions, she often turned heads wherever she went. However, her determination sometimes bordered on stubbornness, especially when she believed she was right. After 5 years of marriage, their relationship appeared ideal, built on trust, respect, love, and deep friendship. However, beneath the surface, simmering tensions threatened their seemingly perfect life. Molly Harrison increasingly became consumed by thoughts of the experiences she felt she had missed before marriage. Despite deeply loving Billy, she couldn't ignore the emptiness caused by not having explored herself like her friends had. Their stories only deepened her sense of regret and dissatisfaction. Billy, caught off guard by Molly's sudden change, initially dismissed it as mere curiosity. However, as she frequently expressed envy over his freedom before they met and lamented her own limited experiences, he began to feel uneasy. Molly's revelations shook the foundation of trust between them, leaving Billy confused and struggling to understand why their life together wasn't enough for her. Conversations between them grew heavy and strained, while Molly became distant, preoccupied with what she felt she had lost. Tension slowly engulfed their marriage, forcing them to confront a challenge to their love, loyalty, and trust. The conversation began innocently enough during a quiet dinner on a Tuesday evening. Billy had prepared one of Molly's favorite meals, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables and a chilled glass of white wine. They had settled into their usual rhythm, sharing anecdotes from work and laughing about small everyday moments. But as the plates were cleared and the wine glasses refilled, Molly's demeanor shifted. Her eyes, which usually sparkled with warmth, now carried an intensity Billy hadn't seen before. "Billy," she began, her voice calm but deliberate, "there's something I've been thinking about for a while, and I need to talk to you about it." Billy set down his fork, his brow furrowing slightly. "What's on your mind, Mole?" he asked, sensing the seriousness in her tone. Molly hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "You know how I've been saying I feel like I missed out on certain experiences before we got married? I've been thinking about how to address that in a way that wouldn't hurt us." Billy felt a knot form in his stomach. "Go on," he said cautiously, his tone signaling both concern and curiosity. Taking a deep breath, Molly continued, "I want to ask you for something, a kind of hall pass, just once, a chance for me to have a new experience, sexually, with someone else." The words hung in the air, heavy and jarring. Billy blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "A hall pass?" he repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. Molly nodded, trying to maintain her composure. "Yes, just one time. It's not about love or replacing you. It's just something I feel I need to do for myself, to get it out of my system." Billy leaned back in his chair, stunned. "Molly, are you seriously asking me to let you sleep with someone else?" His tone was incredulous, his mind racing to process the request. "Yes," Molly said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. "I've been honest with you about how I feel. This isn't about not loving you. It's about something I've been missing. I think it could actually help us in the long run." Billy's jaw tightened, and his face reddened with a mix of anger and hurt. "Help us? Molly, How on earth would sleeping with another man help our marriage? Molly leaned forward, trying to soften her tone. Because it's something I need to feel whole. I've spent so much time thinking about this, and I believe that if I can just have this one experience, it'll clear my mind and let me focus on us completely. You've had your past, Billy. I've never had that chance. Billy shook his head, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Molly, I love you. I married you because I wanted a life with you. Just you. You're saying this isn't about love, but how can it not be? This would change everything between us. Molly reached across the table, her voice pleading. No, Billy, it wouldn't. I'm telling you this because I love you. If I didn't, I wouldn't be honest about it. I'd never cheat on you, and I never will. That's why I'm asking for your permission. Billy stared at her hand on his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Do you even hear yourself, Molly? You're asking me to be okay with something that goes against everything our marriage stands for. Trust, loyalty, commitment. How can you expect me to just allow this? His words went a track of her hands on his arm as she rested a hand on his left cheek, allowing it to rest. Molly's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Because I trust you to understand. You've always been my partner, my best friend. I know this is hard to hear, but it doesn't have to be the end of us. It can be a way to strengthen what we have. Billy pulled his hand away, his voice sharp with pain. Strengthen us? You think watching you walk out the door to be with another man would make me feel stronger? Molly, this isn't just a minor request. This would destroy me. Molly's expression hardened slightly, her tone becoming defensive. You're being dramatic, Billy. This is about me needing to explore something for myself. It's not about you. Billy stood abruptly, pacing the room. Not about me? Molly, I'm your husband. Everything you do affects me in our marriage. How can you say this wouldn't change us? The conversation spiraled as both Molly and Billy became entrenched in their opposing viewpoints. For Molly, this was about reclaiming a part of herself she felt she had sacrificed by marrying young. She believed she was being open and honest, presenting a solution that would ultimately benefit their marriage. To her, it was a temporary detour, a chance to satisfy a lingering curiosity before fully committing to the next chapter of their lives together. Billy, she said, her voice trembling but resolute, I've given you everything in this marriage. I love you with all my heart. But I can't ignore this feeling. It's not fair to either of us if I bury it and let it fester. Billy stopped pacing, turning to face her with a look of raw anguish. Molly, I've given you everything too. My trust, my love, my loyalty, and now you're telling me that's not enough? That I'm not enough? Molly shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It's not about you being enough, Billy. You are. You always have been. But this is something I need for me, not because you lack anything. Billy's voice cracked as he replied. Do you realize what you're asking me to do? To sit here while you leave and be with someone else? To smile and pretend like everything's okay when it's tearing me apart inside? Molly took a step toward him, her tone softening. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to trust me, to believe that this doesn't change how much I love you. Billy's laugh was hollow, bitter. Trust you? Molly, trust is exactly what this would destroy. How could I ever look at you the same way again? The room fell silent as the weight of their words settled over them. For the first time, both of them realized that this conversation was about more than a hall pass. It was about the very foundation of their marriage, and whether it could withstand the cracks that had begun to form. Molly's flirtation with Andrew began innocuously, or so she told herself. It started with shared jokes during team meetings, the kind of playful banter that broke up the monotony of work. Andrew, a young and confident junior colleague, had a natural charisma that Molly found both entertaining and flattering. His compliments were subtle at first, remarks about her sharp wit, her elegance during presentations, but they quickly escalated into something more personal. By the time they started going to lunch together, their conversations had shifted. Molly found herself laughing a little too hard at his jokes and leaning in just a little too close. Andrew, emboldened by her attention, began testing boundaries. You're amazing, Molly, he said one day, his voice low and deliberate. I can't imagine how any man could ever take you for granted. Molly brushed off his words with a laugh, but they lingered in her mind. She told herself it was harmless, just a confidence boost, a momentary escape from the stresses of her life. Yet when Andrew suggested a happy hour, Molly agreed without hesitation. Over drinks, their discussions turned more intimate, filled with teasing and innuendos that left little room for ambiguity. One evening, after their second round of drinks, Andrew leaned closer. "You know," he said softly, "if I were your husband, I'd never let you out of my sight." Molly blushed, her heart racing, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she met his gaze, her own thoughts spiraling. She was drawn to the excitement, the sense of being desired by someone new. When Andrew suggested dinner and dancing the following week, Molly hesitated for only a moment before accepting. By this point, the line between harmless flirtation and emotional infidelity had blurred beyond recognition. Deep down, she knew she was playing with fire, but she rationalized it as part of her exploration, something she needed to process her feelings. Billy, meanwhile, couldn't ignore the changes in Molly. At first, they were subtle. Her phone buzzing more often, her occasional absences explained away as work obligations. But as the weeks went on, her behavior became harder to overlook. Molly had always been warm and engaged, but now she seemed distracted, her laughter less frequent, her attention elsewhere. One evening, after Molly came home unusually late, she seemed both energized and distant. "Rough day?" Billy asked as he handed her a glass of wine. Molly hesitated before responding, her tone overly light. "Oh, just a lot of work. You know how it is." But Billy noticed the faint scent of cologne on her blouse, one that wasn't his. The following week, while folding laundry, Billy saw an unfamiliar restaurant receipt in Molly's pocket. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, and a date that coincided with one of her late work nights. His heart sank as doubt began to take root. He didn't confront her immediately, instead choosing to observe her more closely. Billy began to withdraw emotionally, unsure of how to address what he was feeling. He spent more time in the garage, working on the RV, hoping the repetitive tasks would clear his mind. But the distance between them only grew. Molly, preoccupied with Andrew and her own internal struggles, barely noticed the shift. One night, as they lay in bed, Billy tried to bridge the gap. "Molly, is everything okay between us?" he asked, his voice careful. Molly turned to him, startled. "Of course it is," she replied, a little too quickly. "Why would you ask that?" Billy stared at the ceiling, his chest tight. "You've just seemed different lately. I feel like you're pulling away." Molly sighed, brushing his concerns aside. "Billy, I love you. Stop worrying so much." She kissed him on the cheek and turned off the light, but her words did little to reassure him. Alone in the dark, Billy felt the weight of his doubts crushing him. The woman he loved was slipping away, and he didn't know how to stop it. He couldn't shake the sense that something was deeply wrong, even as he tried to convince himself otherwise. As days turned into weeks, his growing suspicion began to feel like a storm he couldn't outrun, one that threatened to shatter the life he had worked so hard to build. Billy sat at the kitchen table, his hands clasped tightly together. Across from him, Molly sipped her coffee, her expression wary. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling as he began. "Molly, we need to talk. I've been trying to hold it together, but I can't ignore what's happening between us anymore." Molly set her cup down slowly, avoiding his gaze. "Billy, we've already talked about this. I've been honest with you. I don't know why you keep bringing it up." Billy leaned forward, his eyes pleading. "Because it's breaking us, Molly. I love you more than anything, and I feel like I'm losing you. We can't just ignore this and hope it goes away. Let's go to counseling. Talk to someone who can help us work through this." Molly sighed, crossing her arms defensively. "Counseling? Billy, this isn't some crisis. It's just something I need to do for myself. You're making it bigger than it is." Billy's voice cracked with emotion. "How can you say that? You're asking me to be okay with you stepping outside our marriage. That's not something small, Molly. That's everything." Molly's lips tightened, and she finally looked at him. "Billy, it's not like I'm having an affair. I've told you this isn't about love or about us. It's about me, and I need you to trust me." Billy's hands trembled as he ran them through his hair. "Trust you? Molly, you're asking me to trust you while you're planning to be with another man. Do you know how much that hurts? Molly's frustration bubbled to the surface. Billy, you're being dramatic. I've been honest with you because I respect you. If I wanted to go behind your back, I could have, but I didn't. Doesn't that count for anything? Billy's voice rose, filled with anguish. Honesty doesn't make this okay, Molly. You're still asking me to accept something that goes against everything our marriage is built on. Molly pushed her chair back abruptly and stood, pacing the room. Why can't you just see this from my perspective? You've had your fun, Billy. You've been with more women than I can count. I've had no one but you. I'm asking for one chance, just one, and you're acting like it's the end of the world. Billy stood too, his fists clenched at his sides. It is the end of the world, Molly. At least for me. You don't get to compare your choices to mine. I chose you. I committed to you. Molly spun around, her voice sharp. And I'm still choosing you. This doesn't change that. You're so focused on the act itself that you're not hearing me. This is about me needing closure for something I missed out on, not about loving you less. Billy's chest heaved as he fought to keep his voice steady. If you love me as much as you say, how can you do this knowing it's tearing me apart? I prove it daily. Molly's expression softened, but only briefly. Because I believe we're stronger than this, Billy, you're the one making it harder than it has to be. After this is done, we'll move on. I promise. Billy shook his head, his face a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak. You're asking me to move on from a betrayal that hasn't even happened yet. How can you not see what this is doing to us? Molly turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. Billy, I love you, but I need this, and if you really love me, you'll understand. Her words hit him like a final blow, leaving him staring at her back as she walked out of the room. For the first time, Billy felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on him. Molly wasn't just unwilling to reconsider, she was convinced she was right. The Saturday morning air was thick with tension as Molly moved through the house, her heels clicking against the wooden floors with a sense of purpose. She had spent the previous night preparing, her bag neatly packed and sitting by the door. Billy sat in the living room, staring blankly at the television, though it was clear he wasn't paying attention to the screen. Molly entered the room hesitantly, her voice soft but resolute. Billy, I need to say goodbye before I leave. Effectively. Billy didn't turn to face her, his jaw tightening as he took a deep breath. Don't do this, Molly, he said quietly, his voice heavy with a mix of desperation and exhaustion. You're crossing a line you can't uncross. If you walk out that door, everything changes. Molly hesitated, her fingers curling around the strap of her bag. Billy, I've explained this to you. This doesn't change how I feel about us. It's something I need to do for myself, to be fully present in our marriage after this. Finally, Billy turned to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with disbelief. How can you say that? You think this is about you finding closure, but you're destroying me in the process. Molly, if you go, I won't be here when you come back. Molly's lip quivered, but she quickly steeled herself. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I have to trust that you'll understand eventually. I love you, Billy, but this is about me finding peace. Billy stood abruptly, his fists clenched at his sides. Finding peace? You think sleeping with another man will give you peace? You're tearing us apart, and for what? A fling? Molly's face hardened as she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. It's not a fling, it's one time, Billy. That's it. I'll be back Sunday and we'll talk then. Billy's voice cracked as he called after her. If you walk out that door, we're done, Molly. Do you hear me? Done. Molly paused for a moment, her hand on the doorknob. Without looking back, she whispered, Goodbye, Billy. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, and Billy collapsed onto the couch, his heart shattering into pieces. The sound of the door closing was like the toll of a bell, signaling the end of something Billy had once believed to be unbreakable. For a long moment he sat in silence, his hands trembling and his chest heaving with the weight of his emotions. Tears spilled freely down his face as he struggled to come to terms with the reality of Molly's choice. But as the minutes passed, something inside him shifted. A cold clarity began to replace the overwhelming sadness. He realized that if Molly could make this choice so easily, he had to take steps to protect himself. This wasn't just about preserving his dignity. It was about survival. Billy wiped his face, stood up, and headed to the bedroom. He began methodically packing his suitcase with his clothes and personal belongings. His movements were deliberate, each fold and zip a small act of reclaiming control. He left behind items that held memories of their marriage, the framed photos on the dresser, the wedding album tucked away in the closet. He couldn't bear to look at them. Next, he logged into their joint bank account. With a deep breath, he transferred half of the balance into a new account he had opened the day before. It wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring he had the resources to start over if it came to that. He also canceled their shared credit cards, leaving Molly a note with information on how to open her own account. Billy's final step was to write her a letter. Sitting at the kitchen table, he poured his heart onto the page, detailing the pain of her betrayal and the finality of her actions. The pen trembled in his hand, but his words were clear and unflinching. "You've made your choice, Molly," he wrote. "Now I have to make mine. I won't be here when you return. This isn't what I wanted, but you left me no choice." By the time evening fell, Billy had loaded his belongings into the RV he had painstakingly restored, a project he had once envisioned as a symbol of their future adventures together. Now, it was his escape vehicle, a way to leave behind the wreckage of their marriage and start anew. As he drove away, the house growing smaller in his rearview mirror, Billy's mind raced with conflicting emotions. Pain, anger, and a flicker of hope battled for dominance. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't stay in a life where his love and loyalty were disregarded. The miles stretched before him like a promise of freedom, though the ache in his chest remained. He resolved to take each day as it came, letting the open road guide him toward healing. The man who had once built a life around Molly now had to rebuild one for himself. Molly arrived at the hotel feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The past week had been filled with arguments and tension with Billy, and though she hated the way they left things, she told herself that this weekend would give her clarity. She smoothed her dress, adjusted her hair in the lobby mirror, and texted Andrew, "I'm here." A few minutes later, Andrew walked in, exuding confidence. "Hey, Molly," he greeted with a wide smile, leaning in for a brief hug. His cologne was overpowering, and while Molly had once found his self-assuredness alluring, it now felt overly calculated. As they made their way to the suite Andrew had booked, Molly's thoughts wandered back to Billy. His voice, broken with emotion, echoed in her mind. "If you go through with this, we're done." She shook her head, trying to focus on the moment. This was supposed to be about her, about reclaiming a piece of herself. Once inside, Andrew poured them glasses of wine and turned on some music. Molly sat stiffly on the couch, clutching her glass. Andrew sat beside her, his hand resting on her thigh. "You look stunning," he said, his voice low. Oslo did not return when Molly opened her eyes and looked at him with wonder. She reached out. "Thank you," Molly replied, forcing a smile. She sipped her wine quickly, hoping it would calm her nerves. But as Andrew leaned in for a kiss, she felt an unexpected wave of hesitation. His lips were eager but lacked tenderness. His movements rushed. "It's okay, Mala," she answered finally. "I'm not afraid of it." As the night went on, Molly's discomfort grew. Andrew's attempts to be sensual felt clumsy, his charm overshadowed by a selfish urgency. When they finally moved to the bedroom, Molly found herself staring at the ceiling, feeling disconnected and hollow. Afterward, Andrew rolled over, grinning smugly. "You're incredible," he said, brushing her hair away from her face. But his touch felt invasive, and Molly forced a weak smile. "Thanks," she murmured, turning away. By the next morning, Molly couldn't deny the truth. This was not the liberating experience she had envisioned. Instead of feeling empowered, she felt empty. The excitement she had once associated with Andrew had evaporated, replaced by a gnawing sense of guilt and regret. Sitting on the edge of the bed while Andrew showered, Molly stared at her phone, scrolling through old messages from Billy. Her hands trembled as she typed, "Billy, I love you. Please tell me you're okay." But the message remained unsent. She couldn't bring herself to face what she had done. When Andrew emerged, towel slung around his waist, he gave her a lazy smile. "Ready for round 2?" he asked. Molly felt her stomach turn. "I think I'll pass," she said, forcing a polite laugh. "I'm not feeling great." Andrew shrugged, unconcerned, and Molly realized how profoundly different he was from Billy. This man didn't care about her as a person. He only cared about the thrill of the moment. And she had risked everything for this. While Molly spent the weekend with Andrew, Billy's world continued to crumble. After packing his belongings and driving away from the house, he found himself parked in a secluded rest area, unable to move forward. His mind raced with images of Molly, her smile, her laughter, her betrayal. The pain was unbearable. Billy pulled out his phone, staring at Molly's contact. His thumb hovered over the call button, but he stopped himself. What would he even say? "Are you having fun? Is it worth it?" The words felt bitter and empty. Instead, he scrolled through their photos, each one a painful reminder of the life they had built together. A picture of their wedding day made his breath hitch. Molly's radiant smile, the way she had looked at him with such love. It all felt like a cruel illusion now. That night, Billy sat alone in his RV, nursing a bottle of whiskey. His thoughts became darker with each sip. He wondered if he had failed Molly in some way, if there was something he could have done differently. But no matter how he turned it over in his mind, he couldn't escape the conclusion that her decision was hers alone. By Sunday morning, Billy resolved to protect himself from further pain. He opened his laptop and drafted an email to their closest friends and family, explaining what had happened. "Molly has decided to pursue something outside of our marriage," he wrote. "I've done everything I can to save us, but she's made her choice." When he finished, he set the email to send on Monday morning. The act of writing it brought him a strange sense of closure, though his heart still ached. As he stared at the sunrise through the RV window, Billy whispered to himself, "I have to let her go." But the words offered little comfort. The weekend dragged on, each hour feeling like a lifetime. Billy knew that when Molly returned, the person she had been to him would be gone forever. Their marriage was already a memory, one he would carry like a wound that might never heal. The house was eerily silent as Billy methodically packed his belongings. Each item he placed into his suitcase felt like a fragment of the life he was leaving behind. Their smiles, so wide, so full of love, now felt like a cruel reminder of what they once had. He hesitated for a moment, holding the frame in his hands before setting it back on the shelf. Now examining the photo, he saw that his father had cut out specialized photos for private use, one of which was captured in the moment. Before making the shelf-free verification, the print was presently restored to frame and field quite clean. Let her see it, let her remember. In the shared closet, Billy picked out only what he truly needed. As he zipped up his duffel bag, he glanced at Molly's side of the closet, her colorful dresses and neatly arranged shoes. He shook his head, the anger and hurt surging anew. She chose this, not me. At the kitchen table, Billy opened his laptop to compose the email he'd been dreading. The words came slowly, each sentence heavy with pain, but laced with the clarity he now felt. To our friends and family, I'm writing to share something I never thought I'd have to. Molly and I are separating. She has decided to pursue a relationship outside of our marriage despite my pleas to reconsider. I want you all to know I've done everything I could to save us, but this is her decision, not mine. End quote. I love Molly deeply, but I can't stay in a marriage where trust and commitment no longer exist. I hope you'll respect my need for space as I begin this painful transition. He hesitated before hitting schedule, setting the email to send the following morning. The weight of his decision pressed heavily on his chest, but he knew there was no turning back. Finally, he wrote Molly a letter. Each word felt like a final goodbye. Molly, I wanted to tell you this in person, but I can't bear to see you again after what you've done. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but I won't be here when you return. Yet. Goodbye, Billy. He placed the letter on the counter, his wedding ring resting atop it. Taking one last look around the house, Billy shouldered his bags and stepped into the RV. As he drove away, he didn't look back. Molly arrived home on Sunday afternoon. the warm glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the driveway. She paused for a moment, noting the absence of Billy's car. Her chest tightened, but she brushed the feeling aside. He's probably out clearing his head, she thought, trying to reassure herself. Inside, the air was still and heavy. "Billy?" she called out, her voice echoing through the empty house. No response. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she moved through the house. In the living room, her eyes immediately fell on the empty spaces where Billy's belongings had once been. The bookshelf where his favorite novels had sat was bare. Her stomach dropped as she realized the truth before she even saw the letter. In the kitchen, her breath hitched at the sight of the envelope with her name on it. His wedding ring sat on top, a stark symbol of the life she had shattered. Her hands shook as she picked it up, sliding the ring onto her finger for a moment before pulling it off again. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the words through tears. With each line, the gravity of her actions hit her like a tidal wave. By the time she reached the end, she was sobbing, clutching the paper to her chest. Desperate, she grabbed her phone and called Billy, but the line went straight to voicemail. "Billy, please call me back," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please, just come home so we can talk." Her text messages went unanswered, and the silence on the other end of the line only deepened her despair. She dropped to her knees, the letter crumpled in her hands. For the first time, Molly fully understood what she had done and the irreparable damage her choices had caused. The house was eerily quiet as Molly stepped inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She paused, taking in the unsettling stillness. Normally, she would hear Billy's favorite playlist softly playing in the background or the clink of tools in the garage. But today, there was nothing. Safer, and taste, the silence broken only by a muffled hum. "Billy," she called out, her voice echoing. The sound felt hollow, swallowed by the emptiness of the house. A sense of unease crept over her as she set her bag down by the door and moved further into the house. It didn't take long for her to notice something was off. The bookshelf in the living room, once filled with Billy's collection of novels and mementos, was nearly empty. The spot above the fireplace where his uncle's painting of Moonlight Bay had hung was now bare. Molly's breath caught in her throat as realization began to sink in. "No," she whispered to herself, her heart pounding. She moved through the house with increasing urgency, her eyes scanning for more signs of his absence. In their bedroom, the closet told the same story. Billy's side was empty, save for a few wire hangers swaying slightly as if mocking her. His favorite watch, the one he always left on the nightstand, was gone. Her hands trembled as she pulled open drawers, confirming what she already knew: he had left. When she returned to the kitchen, her eyes fell on an envelope resting on the counter. Her name was written in Billy's neat handwriting. Beneath it, his wedding ring sat gleaming under the kitchen light, its significance hitting her like a physical blow. "No, no, no," she muttered, tears streaming down her face. She picked up the envelope with shaking hands and sank into a chair. For a moment, she couldn't bring herself to open it. Her mind raced with thoughts. Maybe he just needs space. Maybe he's gone to cool off. But the wedding ring suggested otherwise. It was a symbol, a finality she wasn't ready to face. Finally, she unfolded the letter, her eyes darting over the words. Each sentence was a dagger, piercing her with the weight of Billy's pain and heartbreak. "Molly, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. You made your choice when you walked out that door, and now I've made mine. I can't stay in a marriage where trust and commitment no longer exist. I can't be the man who waits at home while his wife pursues something with another man. You told me this was just about you, but you didn't seem to care how deeply it hurt me. I tried to reason with you, Molly. I pleaded with you to reconsider, to think about what this would do to us. But you dismissed my feelings, called me dramatic, and refused to see how your actions would destroy everything we built together. I can't live like this. I can't wake up every morning wondering if my love and loyalty will ever be enough for you. I deserve more than that, and so do you. I've taken what I need and left you the rest. The house is yours. I've canceled our joint accounts and opened a new one for myself. My name is off the mortgage. I've left behind the memories of us, but I'm taking my dignity and my hope for a future where I'm truly valued." This isn't what I wanted, Molly. I loved you more than words could ever express. But love isn't enough when trust is broken. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but it won't be with me. The response to the second question turns out to be the same. I want to make you happy. Goodbye, Billy. By the time she finished reading, Molly was sobbing uncontrollably. The letter trembled in her hands as she reread it, hoping she had misunderstood. But the message was painfully clear. Billy was gone, and this time it was for good. She reached for her phone, dialing his number with shaking fingers. The call went straight to voicemail. "Billy," she said through her tears, her voice cracking, "please call me back. I was wrong. I didn't realize, I didn't understand how much I was hurting you. Please come home. I love you. I'll do anything to fix this." The silence on the other end was deafening. She tried again, then again. Each call met with the same automated message. Desperation clawed at her as she typed out a text. "Billy, I love you. I'm sorry. Please tell me you're okay." She stared at the screen, waiting for a response that never came. The realization of what she had done crashed over her in waves. This wasn't just a fight. This was the end. Billy had warned her, begged her to reconsider, and she had ignored him. Now she was alone, left to confront the full weight of her actions. Molly clutched his wedding ring in her palm, tears streaming down her face. The house around her, once a home filled with love and laughter, now felt empty and cold. For the first time, she truly understood the depth of her betrayal and the devastating cost of her choices. But it was too late. Billy was gone, and she had no one to blame but herself. Molly's life unraveled quickly after Billy's departure. The email he sent to their shared circle of friends, family, and co-workers had laid bare the painful truth. Though it was written with restraint, its message was undeniable. Molly had betrayed their marriage, and Billy had chosen to walk away. Her phone buzzed incessantly that Monday morning. At first, she ignored it, dreading the judgment she knew awaited her. But by mid-morning, the silence became unbearable. She opened her messages to find a flood of responses, some supportive, most questioning. Her best friend Lisa called immediately. "Molly, what the hell were you thinking?" Lisa's voice was sharp, hurt. "Billy worshipped you. How could you throw that away?" Molly stammered, unable to form a coherent response. I didn't think it would end like this. I thought..." "You thought what? That Billy would just sit there and wait for you to come back from sleeping with someone else?" Lisa interrupted, her voice incredulous. "You were selfish, Molly, and now you've lost him." The calls and texts from her family were no better. Her mother, usually her unwavering support, sounded devastated. "Molly, I raised you to value love and loyalty. I don't even recognize you right now. How could you do this to Billy? To us?" Her co-workers, who had always admired her professionalism, now looked at her with thinly veiled pity. The whispers in the office were constant, and her reputation as a charismatic and capable leader began to erode. During a routine meeting, a junior accountant muttered under his breath, "Can't even keep her marriage together and we're supposed to trust her judgment?" The comment stung, but Molly said nothing, retreating to her office to cry in private. Andrew, the man who had catalyzed this disaster, was nowhere to be found. When she confronted him at work, he dismissed her curtly. "I didn't sign up for this drama, Molly. You wanted this, not me." In the weeks that followed, Molly's regret consumed her. Nights were the hardest. She would sit in the empty house, surrounded by remnants of the life she and Billy had built together. His laugh, his touch, the way he always kissed her goodnight. All of it haunted her, replaying in her mind like a cruel reminder of what she had thrown away. She often reread Billy's letter, tracing the words with her fingers as if trying to absorb the pain she had caused him. The finality of his goodbye was devastating. "I can't stay in a marriage where trust and commitment no longer exist," he had written. Those words echoed in her thoughts endlessly. Her dreams were filled with memories of happier times, trips they had taken, quiet evenings on the couch, the way he would look at her like she was his entire world. Waking up from those dreams was like losing him all over again. Molly's regret wasn't just about losing Billy, it was about losing herself. She couldn't understand how she had convinced herself that one fleeting moment of excitement was worth the destruction of everything they had built. She replayed every argument, every chance Billy had given her to turn back, and hated herself for not listening. One evening, she wrote him a letter. "Billy," she began, her tears smudging the ink. "I was wrong. I was selfish and blind, and I'll never forgive myself for what I did to us. You were my everything, and I didn't realize it until it was too late. If you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll be waiting." But she never sent it. Deep down, she knew she didn't deserve his forgiveness. Meanwhile, Billy's life slowly began to rebuild. The road trip in his RV became more than an escape. It was a journey of self-discovery. He stopped in small towns, took odd jobs to keep himself busy, and met people who reminded him that life could still hold beauty, even in the wake of heartbreak. At a quiet lakeside campground, he started sketching again, a hobby he hadn't touched since college. The act of creating something new felt therapeutic, a reminder that he could still move forward. Over time, his bitterness began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination to live a fulfilling life. One evening, under a sky full of stars, Billy looked out at the lake and smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't a smile of complete happiness, but it was a start, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find peace again. And, she yelled at him for not having the courage to get up after Miss May. For both Molly and Billy, the road ahead was uncertain. But while Molly was weighed down by her regret, Billy had begun to look toward the horizon, ready to embrace whatever came next. As the months passed, Billy found himself driving along winding roads that stretched endlessly into the horizon. Each mile put more distance between him and the life he once knew. But the memories of Molly lingered. There were moments when her smile, her laugh, and even her flaws would flash in his mind. Yet with every reflection, one truth became clearer. The trust they had shared was irreparably broken. On quiet nights, parked by serene lakes or under star-filled skies, Billy allowed himself to feel the pain fully. He didn't suppress the ache or the anger. Instead, he used them as fuel to rebuild himself. He found solace in simple things, sketching the landscapes around him, fishing in the early mornings, and striking up conversations with strangers who knew nothing of his past. Slowly, these moments pieced him back together. Meanwhile, back at the home they once shared, Molly's regret only deepened. The house felt like a mausoleum of their love, each corner echoing with what had been. She replayed her decisions over and over, asking herself why she hadn't seen the cost until it was too late. The emptiness left by Billy's departure was unbearable, but the weight of knowing she had caused it was worse. Though they were on separate paths, the contrast between them grew stark. While Molly was trapped in a cycle of guilt and loss, Billy was learning to embrace the future. He resolved to find joy not in forgetting Molly, but in rediscovering himself. As he watched a sunrise over a canyon one morning, a sense of peace washed over him. Life, he realized, wasn't about avoiding pain, but about moving through it. For Billy, healing had begun. For Molly, the weight of her choices remained an inescapable shadow. 3 years had passed, but for Molly, time had done little to heal the wound she had inflicted on herself. The once vibrant social woman now lived a quiet, solitary life. Her days revolved around work, and her evenings were spent in the stillness of the home she and Billy had once shared. The vibrant memories of their marriage haunted every corner. The couch where they would curl up together. The kitchen where Billy had tended with care. Though she received occasional invitations to date, Molly declined them all. She couldn't bring herself to move on. Deep down, she remained tethered to the memory of Billy and the love she had squandered. In her heart, she held on to the faint hope that one day he might forgive her, though she knew it was unlikely. Then, one crisp autumn morning, a knock at her door shattered the fragile peace she had constructed. A man handed her an envelope. "You've been served," he said politely, before walking away. Molly's hands trembled as she opened the divorce papers. The stark reality of Billy's decision hit her like a final blow. Molly sat at her kitchen table, staring at the papers through tears. There was no anger, only bittersweet resignation. She picked up a pen and signed her name, whispering, "Goodbye, Billy. I hope you find the happiness I couldn't give you." Meanwhile, Billy sat by a campfire overlooking a canyon, the papers he had filed now out of his mind. For him, The divorce marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As he watched the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was his, and that was enough.